The Zixarian dominion was the embodiment of fear and control. Their fleets darkened the skies of countless planets, their edicts shaping the lives of billions under their rule. To challenge them was unthinkable, to resist them was suicidal. Yet humanity had always been an anomaly in the galactic equation, small, unrefined by Zixarian standards, but persistent, inventive, and dangerously unpredictable. The rebellion on Viridian 4 wasn't an act of defiance. It was an act of survival. The colony, already stretched thin by relentless Zixarian demands, had no choice but to refuse the latest order for resources. The Zixarians, offended by the perceived insolence of what they considered a lesser species, decided to make an example. Their retaliation wasn't swift and silent. It was deliberate and horrifying. 70,000 humans, rounded up like cattle, were hanged publicly over the course of 3 days. Families were torn apart, children forced to witness the deaths of their parents before meeting the same fate. The Zixarians broadcasted the entire event across the galaxy, their cold, detached voices narrating each execution as a warning. Humanity was not merely defeated. It was humiliated, displayed as an object lesson in submission. Across Earth and its colonies, the footage was met with disbelief, then rage. The collective grief was palpable, cutting across cultural and political divides. Mourning turned into a storm of voices demanding action. Candles burned in endless vigils, names of the dead were read aloud in solemn ceremonies, and every human felt the same truth searing into their hearts. This could not be forgiven. General Marcus Kane watched the footage alone in his quarters. A man of discipline and restraint, he had seen his share of horrors on the battlefield, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't war. It was murder, cruelty on a scale meant to break the human spirit. But as he sat in the dim light, he didn't feel despair. He felt clarity, a cold, sharp resolve that settled over him like armor. Kane addressed the unified Human Council the following day. His voice was steady, but the fire in his words was unmistakable. This isn't just an attack on our people. It's a declaration that humanity has no place in this galaxy except as slaves and corpses. If we accept this, we betray the very essence of what it means to be human. His speech rippled through the council chambers, igniting a unity that had long been fractured. But it wasn't just humans who listened. The Zixarians, secure in their dominance, dismissed Kane's words as the impotent cries of a doomed species. Yet, in the shadows of the galaxy, among the oppressed races who had long suffered under Zixarian rule, those words carried a different weight. Humanity's outrage was a spark, and sparks had a way of igniting something much larger. In the days that followed, humanity rallied. Messages of support flooded in from colonies and distant outposts. Soldiers volunteered in record numbers. Engineers worked tirelessly to adapt and upgrade human technology. And Kane's call for justice became a rallying cry. The galaxy has turned its back on us, but we will not turn our backs on ourselves. We will answer the Zixarians, not with words, but with action. The Zixarian Dominion had aimed to instill fear. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. A united humanity, determined not just to survive, but to hold their oppressors accountable. Justice, long silenced under the Dominion's reign, would have a voice once more, and it would roar louder than anyone could have anticipated. General Marcus Kane stood before the Zixarian High Council, a solitary figure dwarfed by the grandeur of their assembly. The council chamber was a display of their arrogance. Towering columns, intricate carvings, and a suffocating aura of superiority. The Zixarian leaders observed Kane with thinly veiled disdain, their glowing eyes betraying nothing but contempt for the human who dared to stand before them. Kane's presence here was not a gesture of submission but a calculated act of defiance. He was no stranger to the Zixarian way, their penchant for theatrics and intimidation. His words, however, were stripped of pomp and artifice. They were cold, measured, and devastatingly precise. 70,000, he began, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a grieving species. 70,000 men, women, and children. Their only crime was daring to exist under your rule. You displayed their broken bodies across the stars, thinking it would silence us. But you miscalculated. It hasn't silenced us. It's awakened something you've long underestimated. Our resolve. The council murmured among themselves, their reactions ranging from amusement to mild annoyance. One of them, adorned in the elaborate robes of their ruling caste, leaned forward. "Human," the counselor said, his voice a deep, resonant growl. "You come here with demands? Do you not understand your position in this galaxy? You are ants before giants. We allowed your kind to exist, and this is how you repay us." Kane's eyes narrowed, but his composure remained unshaken. "Allowed us to exist? Your arrogance blinds you. You see humanity as weak because we don't rule through fear. You believe power is measured by the number of worlds you crush underfoot. But true power comes from unity, from the unbreakable spirit of a people who refuse to be dominated." Another counselor sneered. "Bold words for a species whose blood still stains the soil of Viridian 4. What do you hope to achieve here, General? Do you seek vengeance? Reparation? Or is this your feeble attempt to beg for mercy?" Kane's voice hardened, cutting through the chamber's mocking undertone. "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to warn you. Humanity demands justice, not just for the 70,000 murdered, but for every atrocity you've committed. We are no longer your subjects. From this day forward, we are your adversaries." The chamber fell silent. For a moment, the Zixarians seemed to register the gravity of Kane's words. Then, laughter erupted. It was a cold, hollow sound, echoing off the walls. One counselor rose, his towering form imposing even from a distance. "Justice? You dare speak of justice to us? Your species is insignificant. You have no fleets capable of matching ours, no armies that could withstand even a fraction of our might. What justice could you possibly hope to deliver?" Kane allowed the laughter to subside before responding. His voice was calm, almost soft, yet each word landed like a hammer. "You mistake our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for submission. Humanity is not as powerless as you believe, and we are no longer alone. Your atrocities have not only united us but also awakened the oppressed across your empire. Your own people whisper of rebellion. The cracks in your dominion are widening, and humanity will ensure those cracks become a chasm." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the faces of the counselors. Kane continued, his tone unyielding. "You have a choice. Face justice willingly and dismantle the machinery of your tyranny, or face the consequences of humanity's wrath. We may not match your fleets in size, but war is not always won by numbers. It is won by strategy, by resilience, and by the willingness to fight for what is right." One of the younger counselors, visibly unnerved, leaned toward his superior, whispering something that Kane couldn't hear. The older counselor silenced him with a wave of his hand before turning back to Kane. "Your audacity is impressive, General, but ultimately futile. Leave now while we still permit it, or your species will face annihilation." Kane stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You don't understand, do you? Humanity is prepared to fight, to bleed, and if necessary, to die for our freedom. But we will not die alone. If you escalate this war, your empire will crumble. That's not a threat. It's a certainty." With that, Kane turned and left the chamber, his words hanging in the air like the toll of a distant bell. Behind him, the Zixarian Council debated, their confidence shaken, their unity fraying. Kane had planted a seed of doubt, and in the days to come, that seed would grow into something far more dangerous. The call to arms was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. In the wake of General Kane's confrontation with the Zixarian High Council, the message spread like wildfire. Across human colonies and outposts, volunteers poured into recruitment centers, their faces hardened with determination. Engineers, scientists, and strategists worked tirelessly, repurposing every resource to strengthen humanity's defenses. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for identity, for justice, and for the souls of the 70,000 whose lives had been stolen. Humanity's fleet, once modest and scattered, became a symbol of ingenuity. What the Zixarians had in size and raw power, humans matched with adaptability and innovation. Ships were retrofitted with experimental technologies, cloaking systems, energy shields, and weaponry designed to exploit the weaknesses of Zixarian warships. Every detail was scrutinized, every tactic meticulously planned. Kane personally oversaw these preparations, his mind a relentless engine of strategy. The first strike came not as an open declaration of war but as a calculated disruption. A small, agile task force infiltrated a Zixarian outpost deep within their territory. The target wasn't soldiers or civilians but a communications relay vital to their military coordination. Within hours, the relay was dismantled, leaving a significant portion of the Zixarian fleet blind and isolated. It wasn't just a tactical victory, it was a statement. Humanity was no longer the prey, they were the hunters. Word of the attack spread quickly, not just among the Zixarians but among the countless species they had subjugated. For the first time, the invincible facade of the Dominion began to crack. Across their empire, whispers of hope turned into action. Minor uprisings erupted on distant worlds, inspired by humanity's audacity. Kane's gamble was paying off. The Zixarians were not just fighting humans but the embers of rebellion they had long thought extinguished. As the Zixarians scrambled to regroup, Kane launched a series of swift, decisive strikes. Each engagement was carefully chosen, targeting supply lines, resource depots, and isolated fleets. The Zixarians, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Kane's tactics were unpredictable, his strategies unconventional. He exploited the rigidity of Zixarian command structures, forcing them to react to his moves rather than dictate the pace of the war. Despite these victories, the cost of resistance was steep. Human lives were lost in every battle, and the strain of constant warfare began to show. Kane carried this burden silently, his resolve unbroken but his heart heavy. He knew the weight of every decision, every life sacrificed for the greater good. Yet he also knew the stakes. This wasn't just about humanity's survival, it was about reshaping the galaxy itself. The turning point came during the Battle of Ixora Prime, a critical Zixarian stronghold and a symbol of their dominance. Kane's fleet, outnumbered 3-1, executed a daring maneuver that would later be studied as a masterpiece of strategy. Using false signals and decoy ships, they lured the Zixarian armada into a trap, forcing them into a narrow asteroid field where their larger ships became liabilities. In the chaos that followed, humanity delivered a crushing blow, destroying a significant portion of the Zixarian fleet and capturing the planet. The victory at Ixora Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the Zixarian Dominion appeared vulnerable. Their leaders, once untouchable, now faced growing dissent within their own ranks. Some of their allies began to question their loyalty to an empire that could no longer guarantee victory. Kane capitalized on this momentum, reaching out to other species who had suffered under Zixarian rule. His message was simple but powerful. Humanity fights not just for ourselves, but for all who dream of freedom. Stand with us, and together we can end this tyranny. The response was overwhelming. Formerly fragmented resistance movements began to unite, their efforts coordinated under Kane's leadership. The galaxy was no longer divided into conquerors and conquered. It was becoming something new, a coalition of the oppressed united by a common enemy. Kane's vision was taking shape, not just as a military campaign but as a movement that would redefine the galaxy's future. The Zixarians, once the pinnacle of power, now found themselves on the defensive, their empire crumbling under the weight of its own hubris. But Kane knew the fight was far from over. The Zixarians were wounded, but they were still dangerous, and the road to justice would be long and perilous. Yet, for the first time, humanity stood not in the shadow of fear but in the light of hope.